The PlayStation Vita. I've always loved this thing. There are so many hidden gems and amazing games to play, and I wish the library would get the respect it deserves. But unfortunately, we're not talking about the Vita entirely today, but we are talking about part of its life, the PlayStation TV. Now, when this came out, it was pretty flawed, but there's some very easy stuff you can do to make this the ultimate Vita companion. And speaking about easy things you can do, check out today's sponsor.
Let me be honest, I don't know how to cook. The thought of meal planning is nightmarish because that takes, well, planning, and I don't have time for that. Well, that's how I used to be until I started using HelloFresh, the sponsor for today's video. HelloFresh takes all the stress out of figuring out what you're going to eat. Simply go to their website, pick out what you want out of the 50 available recipes provided each week, and HelloFresh will ship it straight to your door. Alright, cool, it's in front of me. What do I do with it? Well, thanks to the step-by-step recipes and pre-portioned ingredients, I can take this assortment of food and transform it into a meal the entire family wants to eat. It's an honest-to-goodness confidence builder as thanks to these foolproof recipes, I've actually learned to enjoy cooking. I'm no longer a fool, and that's mainly due to HelloFresh, at least in the kitchen. But the ease of everything allows me to finish up work, create a delicious meal in less than an hour, bask in the glow of a job well done, and have everything cleaned up in no time flat. Plus, with so many different options like vegetarian, pescatarian, and fit and wholesome, it's easy to stick to a healthy diet or whatever food preferences you have. I'm not kidding when I say HelloFresh changed how I view dinner time. No longer do I have food going to waste in the fridge from meals I'm too lazy to cook. Having everything pre-portioned leads to less wasted food, and I feel less guilty. Seriously, give it a shot as I've recommended it to friends even before this wonderful opportunity from HelloFresh. I mean, look at this lineup of recipes we've collected since starting HelloFresh, and none are repeats. We kinda sorta really like it. So be sure to use my link or go to HelloFresh.com and use the code POGGVG16 for up to 16 free meals plus 3 surprise gifts across 6 HelloFresh boxes plus free shipping. Those gifts include appetizers, desserts, and premium recipes. I mean, I can make ramen. Is this what power feels like?
The PlayStation Vita was one of the most underrated systems of all time. Huge legacy lineup with a vast amount of PlayStation 1 and PlayStation Portable games available here on the PlayStation Store. Tons of native ports like the Metal Gear Solid HD collection, Rayman Origins, and Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed. And then some truly must-have exclusive games like Gravity Rush, Tearaway, and at least before Steam, Persona 4 Golden. Sony even had an exclusive Uncharted on this thing. However, one thing I certainly missed from the PSP era was the ability to play these games on the big screen. Both the PSP 2000 and 3000 had a little port on the side enabling component video out. It was a little cumbersome to be wired up like this, knowing one fatal pull could send your TV plummeting, but it was cool and still remains a good way of capturing PSP footage. But it's not the best way. In 2013 in Japan, Sony released the PlayStation Vita TV. We'll get it just a few months later in 2014 in a different colour and with a slightly different name, just the PlayStation TV. What's a Vita? The PlayStation TV is essentially a Vita without a screen, buttons, or a battery. You can plug it in via a power outlet, slide in an HDMI cable, and connect either a DualShock 3 or a DualShock 4. And hey, you've got a PlayStation Vita console! Without all the expenses of mobile components, the PlayStation TV was able to launch at only $99. This was much less than the Vita's launch price of $249.99. And being a Vita means you have access to not only your Vita games, but also stuff you bought on PlayStation 3, PSP, and even PlayStation 4. If you bought games on console like Hotline Miami or Resogun, then you've got a cross-buy version waiting to be downloaded on Vita. And if you bought Bishi Bashi Special on PS3 in 2007, you can still download it right now in 2022 and play it on your PlayStation TV. On paper, it was a really appealing product. This was during the era where everyone was selling a little set-top box or a dongle, and so a tiny PlayStation console capable of playing PlayStation 1 games and hosting apps like Netflix and YouTube had mainstream potential. I got this for £40 the year it came out. It's become something of a more desirable product now, but in its time the PlayStation TV was incredibly flawed. Being a PlayStation Vita but without all the specific functions of a Vita meant that many games weren't exactly optimal. Games that use the front or rear cameras, the front or rear touchpads, the microphone, the gyro sensor, all these games were essentially incompatible with the PlayStation TV. But it wasn't just a case of certain games running into roadblocks. No, Sony outright blacklisted a massive chunk of the library, so many games that you own can't even boot on the PlayStation TV. What more, many decisions don't make any sense. Games like Persona 4 Golden run fine, and that's what many people bought the system for. In fact, this was a killer Persona machine, not just for 4, but the PSP versions of 1, 2, and 3, and then all the dancing games work on the TV. So Persona got off fine, but why doesn't PlayStation All-Stars work? Why doesn't Dragon Quest Builders work? It's even questionable why some touch-focused games are incompatible, as Sony implemented a way to use touch. Clicking in the left stick brings up a little cursor for the front touchscreen, and the right stick does the back touchscreen. Heck, even the DualShock 4 touchpad works as a touchscreen. Sure, it's not as intuitive as the real thing, but they put this in here. Why blacklist so many games that barely use touch when you have this right here? Some blacklistings are more understandable, as these games make heavy use of the PlayStation Vita features. Uncharted Golden Abyss has a lot of touch, it uses the camera, it uses gyro, it pretty much used everything. But just looking at Sony's first-party games, you can't play Uncharted, you can't play Little Big Planet, you can't play Wipeout, you can't play Everybody's Golf, you can't play Gravity Rush. Pretty much anything Sony made for this thing doesn't work. And the settings are pretty disappointing too. They've put on a bilinear filter with no way to turn it off, and like this has its uses, it makes text look a lot better on a bigger display, but it also just blurs everything. I'd much rather have the chunky raw pixels, but there's no option. So as a PlayStation Vita, this was pretty disappointing out of the box. It could still play most available PSP and PS1 games just fine, but apparently the market who would buy a dedicated machine just for that is pretty small, and this thing just didn't catch on. However, that isn't the end of the PlayStation TV story. Thanks to efforts from the homebrew scene, the PlayStation TV can be exactly the machine we wanted it to be, and then some. Given that the PlayStation TV is a Vita, it can run pretty much any Vita homebrew. I'm not going to provide any tutorials on how to do this stuff, there's plenty of that out there. I just want to show you how good a homebrewed PlayStation TV can really be. Now, one of my best friends is Auto Plugin 2. This very easily installs a bunch of Vita plugins and applications with the press of a button, so here's a few things to claim to make the PlayStation TV amazing. First and foremost, Dulce Pulse. This removes the blacklist check, meaning any PlayStation Vita app can now boot. Any game, any application, anything can now run. There are other whitelisters out there, but this one works the best for me. I found that some of them block updates from working, but this one right here, no problems at all. Next up is DS Motion. This allows us to use the gyro sensor found in either the DualShock 3 or the DualShock 4. You'd think this is something that Sony could have done by default, but nope. There was no motion at all prior to this. Now any game that uses motion is absolutely fine. And the last recommendation is Sharp Scale. This gives you much more flexibility for image quality. One of my favorite things about Sharp Scale is we can finally disable bilinear filtering and see the beautiful raw pixels in their sharp and pointy state. Another thing is you can adjust the screen size. So why would we do this? Well, given the resolution of a Vita screen is 540p, stretching that out to fill the entire screen is obviously going to harm the image quality. So this second option right here basically fixes the size at regular Vita resolution. Sure, there's a lot of empty space, but the games themselves look really, really good. The third option's more of a curiosity, the real option. A lot of Vita games don't run at 540p, so while some of them do fill the 540p display, others look more like this. And for reference, PSP games look like this, and PS1 games look like this. With screens this small, it's not really something you'd want to use for every game, but I really like the second display for maintaining an uncompressed and unstretched output alongside point scaling. But because this is a YouTube video and you're probably watching on a very small display anyway, we're going to keep things in the original output. Point scaling stays on though. So suddenly, we can make our PlayStation TV look a whole lot better and run anything a native Vita could. Super Monkey Ball Banana Splits now boots just fine. It relies on touch for all the menus, but that's nothing a PlayStation TV couldn't have done anyway. But something it certainly couldn't do was motion, and that now works totally fine. Uncharted Golden Abyss is an interesting one to test, as this launch title pretty much used every single feature of the Vita. Front touch, rear touch, motion, and all that stuff is totally fine on the PlayStation TV now. There's perhaps one problem later in the game where a certain puzzle requires use of the camera. So what do we do there? That's where the fake camera plugin saves the day. It won't help absolutely everything, but it stops games that require the camera from crashing by simply displaying an image of your choice, and in some cases, that image could also be the solution. So in Uncharted, you've basically got to show the camera a light source. So to solve that, your picture should just be something like, I don't know, the sun. But just because every game's now compatible obviously doesn't mean every game's gonna be optimal. But it's this freedom that should have been here in the first place. Instead of stopping us from playing entirely, just let us know that things are gonna be a little bit fiddly. We could have worked out what works and what doesn't, and as it turns out, the vast majority of games work totally fine. This is really good. The PlayStation TV is now on parity with Vita, but we can do more. I didn't end up building much of a digital PSP collection because most of my collection is physical. My darn UMDs just won't fit! But even regardless of that, some PSP games just weren't sold digitally. The whole digital sale of retail PSP games truly kicked off with the PSP Go, and so many games predating the Go never made their way to the PlayStation Store. One big one is Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. Now, the copy protection on PSP and PS1 games hasn't been cracked, and for good reason. A different method works totally fine. Instead of running them as a native Vita app, you can download Adrenaline. What this does is it loads the PSP operating system. So now we've got a PSP within a Vita within a PlayStation TV. Any game that's stored in the ISO folder within the PSP section of our memory card will show up right here. Crisis Core can now be played natively on the big screen with a controller, and this is absolutely awesome. And you know, this was far from the only major game to not go digital. Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep is another. Puyo Puyo Fever, Metal Gear Acid 1 and 2, Mega Man Powered Up, Outrun. I could be here for a while just naming games. There's a pretty extensive amount of gaps on the store, and now we can fill those gaps. All in all, this is an improvement over an actual PSP. We're not only going from component to HDMI, but now we can sit back comfortably with a controller. There's even patches out there to give some PSP games native Vita controls, meaning dual analog sticks. And there's so much more we can do. For an upcoming video, I needed footage of Shovel Knight. Basically, I needed the Kratos boss fight, and I didn't have time to get further into the game. So what I did was I just downloaded a save. Using the Save Manager app, I can back up my own save, store it on a PC, or just replace it with someone else's save. And hey, this is cool. The PC port of Mario 64 has found itself on pretty much any console that can possibly run it. And here we are on Vita and PlayStation TV in full 60fps widescreen, far beyond anything any official Nintendo release has ever done. And it's not just Mario 64, there's a Vita port of Sonic CD. Just drag this file from your authentic Steam copy of the game, and it works just fine on Vita. There's also widescreen ports of Sonic 1 and 2 on Master System. That's rad. So the PlayStation TV was definitely a flawed product when it came out, but now there's so much you can do. It's just a brilliant way to play PSP games and Vita games and PS1 games, and more, like Mario 64. I love this thing now. It really is a brilliant console. So even though it came out and was kind of bad, now, I mean, I don't speak any hyperbole here, but I feel like this is a must-have for any PlayStation fan. Playing Crisis Core on the big screen or Uncharted Golden Abyss, there's just too much on offer here to ignore. You can even play the Vita's exclusive Muppets game on the big screen. This is why the Vita 1 and the 3DS failed.